Labour being accused of hypocrisy over lavish spending by civil servants. Some of these, I mean, you laugh, except it's our money. It's our taxpayers' money here. Large entertaining bills in private members' clubs, including £2,240 at the British Club in Thailand, £975 at London's Reform Club, £940 at the Kildare Street and University Club in Dublin. And the Foreign Office spent £998 on food and drinks on a visit to Sokha Beach Resort in Cambodia. In total, David Lammy's department, the Foreign Office, spent £521,525 on restaurants and bars in the first 4 months of the Labour government. Now, this is something they have criticised the Conservatives for doing. Is this just what government costs? Shimeon Lee is a policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance. Welcome to you. What do you make of this?
Well, thank you for having me, Peter. And I think you're absolutely right. This is just another case of typical politicians. They talk a big talk before the election, but when it's actually their turn to govern, they do the exact same thing. Labour said they weren't going to raise taxes on working people during the election, and after they won the election, they did exactly that. They accused the Conservative government of wasting taxpayers' money, and that's absolutely true. But now when they're in government, they're doing the exact same thing. I think your point about how ridiculous some of these expenses are is absolutely true. I mean, if you look at the lifestyle that some of the people in the public sector lead, it's frankly unrecognizable to taxpayers who are the ones that are ultimately footing the bill. I mean, not just their massive defined benefit pensions, which are, completely unheard of in the private sector, but all these sort of business class trips, private members clubs, fancy dinners at five-star hotels, £500 wine glasses. I mean, all of this comes at a taxpayer's expense. Taxpayers who, we don't need to remind people, are actually facing a record high tax burden, 80-year high by the end of this parliament. Now, that's something that's simply not acceptable. When people pay their taxes, they think that money is going towards, reducing the NHS waiting list, getting more police officers on the streets, getting, their bins collected. They do not think that their money is going towards £500 wine glasses and these sort of fancy dinners. And
is some of this just the cost of doing business? Because if you're entertaining other governments, we want Britain to put on a good show abroad. But and also, I suppose the second part of what I want to ask you is there any way in which the politicians can actually get a grip of this and tell the civil service no? And I mean, I'm not sure I want secretaries of state signing off, expenditure over £100 or something like that.
Well, to your first point about whether this is necessary, I mean, we should be looking at the results they actually deliver. It'd be one thing if they were spending all this money on hospitality and they were actually getting, a good deal for British taxpayers. But if you look at the Foreign Office, for example, one of the biggest spenders in terms of hospitality, what have they been in the news recently for? The Chagos Island deal, where these brilliant negotiators have negotiated a deal where we're giving away these islands and we're paying £9 billion for the privilege of doing so. I mean, in many cases, we're literally paying them to give away our money. I think it's a very serious question that has to be asked. Do these public sector workers even know who they're supposed to be working for? I mean, everything that they spend is taxpayer money. And in many cases, it seems they're more interested in, living the high life than actually delivering for taxpayers.
I was a special advisor in the government for 3.5 years, and I spent probably quite a lot of taxpayers' money flying between Belfast and London. Now, every single time we did that, we had to come up with a business case and say, look, this has to be done for the government of this country to function. We need to do these talks with these parties to try to get Stormont back. We need to go back to London because there's government to be done in Whitehall and so on. Some government spending is definitely needed. And actually, I wonder what you think about the Cabinet Office spending £1,050 on training resources from the Plain English campaign to fight gobbledygook in the civil service. To me, that's a bargain.
Well, I think, at the end of the day, these civil servants are ultimately accountable to the people, and they have to be able to justify every single penny that they spend. I think it's not just a simple matter of, changing governments or changing the people on top. It's a real culture sort of issue, right? So if you're unable to stand in the same room as a pensioner who's had their sort of winter fuel payment cut, if you're not able to justify it to a small business owner who's facing, a massive tax rise with the employer's national insurance, if you're not able to justify your spending to, for example, to a farmer who's going to face, a massive increase in their inheritance tax, then you shouldn't be doing it.
That's a very good point, Shimeon. And what I always, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but what I always tried to do was think, look, if this is a pensioner or someone, on a low income who's paying taxes, can I justify this flight, for example? That's the best example I can give. But really, I think a lot of people would be very shocked where some of their taxpayer money goes to. I mean, these amounts, even £500,000 of government spending is actually a small amount of money, but in comparison to the many billions we spend, 3 billion we're giving to Ukraine, for example, and we're asking the question today whether they deserve more aid. But actually, Shimeon, I think this is an illustrative point, isn't it? These are individual examples, but also many people will say, what do you need those wine glasses for? What do you need that food and drink for? What do you need that crystal glass for? What do you need these trips for? What do you need bespoke shoes for?
You're absolutely right. And another major issue is the lack of transparency around these things. I mean, we talk about these government procurement cards, which they use to buy all these things. I mean, half of government departments haven't even reported their returns on these cards since the end of the since the election. So it's a very important question of transparency as well. Do we even know what they're spending this money on? In many cases, they have very vague titles. Entertainment could mean anything. It could mean just £500 on tableware. It could be £500 on wine glasses, or £500.
They do need to be much more specific and have the level of transparency that with MPs, for example, when they have expenses after 2010. Now we can see the receipts and things like that. Maybe that should be the case for the civil service. Very interesting talking to you today, Shimeon. Thank you very much indeed. That's Shimeon Lee there, who's a policy analyst from the Taxpayers Alliance.